The Crow's Nest station hung like a silver jewel against the backdrop of the Alara galaxy's spiral arms. Its rotating rings caught the light of three distant suns, creating prismatic flashes that danced across its metallic hull. Inside the station hummed with the activity of dozens of species conducting trade diplomacy and the shadowy business that flourished in the galaxy's outer reaches. Vi stood at the observation deck, her forearms crossed in a gesture that would have seemed impossible to human anatomy. The Azuran skin shimmered with a faint, iridescent sheen that shifted between deep blue and violet under the station's artificial lighting. Her large, multifaceted eyes reflected the starfield beyond the transparisteel viewport, but her attention was focused inward on the weight of the data crystal concealed within her uniform. The crystal contained information that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy genetic research that her people had conducted in secret for generations. As the runner-up commander of the Azuran military, Vi had risked everything to obtain it. Now, she needed to deliver it to the right hands before the corrupt factions within her own government realized what she had done. Commander Vi. The voice belonged to the information broker, a shadowy figure whose species remained hidden beneath layers of environmental suits and voice modulators. Your escort has arrived. Vi turned her movements fluid, despite the tension she felt. The broker gestured toward a figure approaching across the deck, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the predatory grace of a trained soldier. Human, she realized with surprise. Most Azurans considered humans to be crude, limited creatures from a backwater world. They were thought to be physically weak, intellectually inferior, and culturally primitive. The human stopped before her and gave a slight nod. "Wyatt," he said simply. "I understand you need safe passage to Nexus Station." Vi studied him with her enhanced vision, taking in details that would have been invisible to most species. His muscular frame spoke of years of conditioning. His scars told stories of battles survived, and his eyes held an alertness that reminded her of the apex predators from Azura's ancient oceans. The journey passes through Calaris space, Vi said, her translator rendering her complex tonal language into standard galactic. The recent meteor storms have made that route particularly dangerous. "That's why you need me," Wyatt replied. His voice carried no boastfulness, just simple confidence. "I've run that route a dozen times. My ship can handle whatever we encounter." Vi felt a flicker of skepticism. The Calaris system was notorious for more than just meteor storms. The planet Calaris itself was a world of savage beauty, its jungles teeming with creatures that had evolved to be perfect killing machines. Pirate smugglers, and worse, used the system's natural hazards as cover for their operations. "And your fee?" she asked. The information broker had already negotiated the terms, but Vi wanted to hear them from the human directly. Trust would be essential for this mission, and trust began with honesty about motivations. 50,000 credits now half on delivery, Wyatt said. "Your safety and the safety of whatever you're carrying are guaranteed." Vi made her decision. Time was running short, and despite her people's prejudices about humans, something in Wyatt's demeanor convinced her he was capable. She transferred the first payment through her neural interface. "When do we leave?" "Now." Wyatt's ship, the Aurora's Edge, was docked at one of the station's smaller bays. From the outside, it looked like a standard civilian transport, sleek, but unremarkable, the kind of vessel that wouldn't attract attention. As they boarded, Vi noticed subtle modifications: reinforced hull plating, military-grade shield generators, and weapon hardpoints that had been carefully concealed. "Expecting trouble?" she asked, as they made their way to the bridge. "Always," Wyatt replied, his fingers dancing over the control panels with practiced efficiency. "Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it." The ship detached from the station with minimal fanfare, sliding into the star-speckled void of space. Vi secured herself in the passenger seat, watching Wyatt work. His movements were economical, precise, speaking of countless hours spent in this exact environment. Whatever prejudices her people held about humans, this one clearly knew his business. For the first several hours, the journey proceeded smoothly. They passed through the outer marker buoys of the Alara system and began the transit toward Colaris space. Vi spent much of the time reviewing the data crystal's contents through her neural interface, ensuring the information remained intact and uncorrupted. The genetic research contained within was revolutionary proof that the evolutionary paths of various galactic species were not as divergent as previously believed. The implications for medicine, biotechnology, and even warfare were staggering. But more than that, it suggested that the rigid hierarchies and prejudices that divided the galaxy's peoples might be based more on politics than biology. "Hull breach in the engine compartment," Wyatt announced suddenly, his voice cutting through Vi's concentration. "We're losing atmosphere fast." Vi's four arms moved instinctively to the emergency restraints as the ship shuddered around them. Through the viewport, she could see they were approaching Colaris, a world of deep green and azure blue, covered in vast continental forests and shallow seas. "Can you repair it?" she asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. Wyatt's hands flew over the controls, trying to stabilize their descent. "Not in flight. We're going down, but I can get us to the surface in one piece." The ship bucked and rolled as they hit Colaris's atmosphere. Through the chaos, Vi marveled at Wyatt's skill. Lesser pilots would have lost control entirely, but he guided their wounded vessel through the atmospheric entry with the precision of a surgeon. The forest canopy rushed up to meet them, and at the last second Wyatt fired the emergency repulsors, cushioning their impact as they crashed through the trees. When the debris stopped falling and the emergency system stopped screaming, Vi found herself hanging upside down in her restraints, her head ringing but otherwise uninjured. Wyatt was already moving checking systems and gathering equipment from the ship's emergency lockers. "We need to move," he said, handing her a field pack and a sidearm. "The hull breach wasn't accidental. Someone sabotaged us. That means they don't want you reaching Nexus Station, and they probably don't want you alive." Vi accepted the weapon, her mind reeling. Who could have accessed Wyatt's ship? The implications were troubling. It suggested someone with considerable resources and connections had discovered her mission. "How far to the nearest settlement?" she asked, as they climbed out of the wreckage. 40 kilometers through the jungle," Wyatt replied, shouldering a much larger pack that seemed to contain their portable shelter and survival gear. 3 days on foot if we don't run into trouble." Vi looked around at the alien landscape surrounding them. The trees of Colaris were massive, their trunks easily 20 meters in diameter, reaching up into a canopy so thick that only scattered beams of sunlight penetrated to the forest floor. Strange calls echoed through the green twilight, and she caught glimpses of movement in the underbrush that made her grateful for the weapon at her side. "And if we do run into trouble," Wyatt's expression was grim, "then we deal with it." They set out immediately, Wyatt leading the way, with a confidence that suggested he had navigated similar terrain before. Vi followed her four arms, helping her maintain balance as they climbed over fallen logs and navigated through the dense undergrowth. Her people were not natural hikers. Azuran cities were built vertically, with most transportation handled by aircraft or maglev systems. As they walked, Vi found herself watching Wyatt with growing curiosity. The human's reputation for physical weakness seemed increasingly unfounded. He moved through the jungle with an efficiency that impressed her, reading the terrain like a book and adjusting their route to avoid obstacles before they became problematic. "Where did you serve?" she asked during one of their brief rests. "Earth Defense Force, 15th Special Operations Group," he replied, taking a careful drink from his water recycler. "Tour of duty in the Vega conflicts, then private security after that." Vi had heard of the Vega conflicts, a brutal series of border wars between human space and the hegemony of the Crab Nebula. The fighting had been notorious for its intensity and the skill it had taken to survive. Her respect for Wyatt increased another notch. "Why choose escort work?" "Pays better than the military, and I choose my own missions." He stood, shouldering his pack. What about you? Not many Azuran commanders travel alone. This journey requires discretion, Vi said carefully. There are those within my government who would prefer the information I carry never reach its destination. Wyatt nodded, seemingly understanding without requiring further explanation. It was a quality Vi appreciated in Azuran culture. Direct questions about sensitive matters were considered rude, unless the questioner was of higher rank. They had been walking for 2 hours when Vi heard the first howl. It came from somewhere behind them, a sound like metal, tearing crossed with a predator's roar. Wyatt stopped immediately, his hand going to the rifle across his back. Razor fangs, he said quietly. Pack hunters. Very territorial, very aggressive, and very hungry. Vi had read about Calaris's fauna during her mission briefing. Razor fangs were among the planet's apex predators, 6-legged creatures the size of earth wolves, with metallic teeth that could shear through steel, and a pack intelligence that made them formidable opponents for even armed groups. Another howl answered the first, then another. The sounds seemed to be coming from multiple directions, suggesting they were being surrounded. How many? Vi asked, checking her weapon's charge. At least 6, probably more. Wyatt's voice was calm, professional. They're trying to box us in, standard pack tactics. Vi felt a chill that had nothing to do with the jungle's damp air. A pack of razor fangs was considered a threat sufficient to turn back expeditions of a dozen well-armed explorers. With just the 2 of them, their chances seemed poor. There, Wyatt said, pointing toward a massive tree whose trunk showed what appeared to be natural caves, or hollows near its base. We can make a stand there, limit their angles of attack. They ran. Behind them, the howls grew closer, more frequent. Vi's superior Azuran vision caught glimpses of movement in the forest, lean muscular shapes flowing between the trees with liquid grace. Her forearms pumped as she ran, her breath coming in short gasps. Humans might have greater endurance, but Azurans were built for quick bursts of speed. They reached the tree with seconds to spare. The hollow was larger than it had appeared, from a distance easily large enough for both of them to take cover. Wyatt immediately began setting up a defensive position, using their packs and fallen logs to create a crude but effective barricade. The first razor fang emerged from the jungle like a metallic nightmare. Vi's breath caught in her throat. The creature was larger than she had expected, its dark hide rippling with muscle. Its distinctive fangs caught the filtered sunlight, looking like curved daggers made of some alien metal. Its 6 legs gave it a spider-like gait that was both graceful and deeply unsettling. More emerged from the jungle, their pack formation as precise as any military unit. Vi counted 8, then 10, then lost track as more shadows moved between the trees. Her weapon felt inadequate in her hands as she raised it. Wait for my signal, Wyatt said. His voice was steady, almost conversational. Let them close the distance. We need to make every shot count. The razor fangs began to circle, testing their defenses. Their intelligence was evident in the way they moved, some feinting attacks to draw fire, others probing for weaknesses in the barricade. Their leader, a scarred brute that was half again as large as the others, held back, directing the pack with subtle body language. Now, Wyatt said quietly. They opened fire simultaneously. Vi's shots were precise, methodical, each bolt finding its target. But she quickly realized that stunning the creatures was not enough. Their metallic hides seemed to dissipate much of the weapon's energy, and even direct hits only slowed them down. Wyatt's rifle produced different results. Each shot tore through the creature's defenses, sending them sprawling. But even his heavier weapon seemed to require multiple hits to bring down each beast. The pack leader decided the probe had lasted long enough. With a roar that seemed to shake the very trees it charged. What happened next would be burned into Vi's memory for the rest of her life. Instead of continuing to fire, Wyatt set down his rifle and stepped out from behind the barricade. The razor fang was in mid-leap, its massive form blotting out the jungle beyond its fangs, extended in what should have been a killing strike. Wyatt caught the creature in mid-air. Vi watched in stunned disbelief as the human's hands seized the predator's forelegs. His muscles strained for a moment, tendons standing out like cables, and then impossibly, he twisted. The sound was horrific. Bone cracked, metal scraped against metal, and flesh tore. The razor fang, this apex predator that could hunt in packs and bring down prey many times its size, was being dismantled like a child's toy. Wyatt tore off one of the creature's forelegs completely, the appendage coming away with a wet, ripping sound. The beast tried to twist away, but Wyatt's grip was implacable. With his free hand, he grabbed the creature's head and applied leverage that no human should have been capable of generating. Another crack, final and definitive. The pack leader went limp. The remaining razor fangs froze, their pack instincts warring with the primal fear radiating from their alpha's sudden death. Wyatt stood among the wreckage of their leader, holding the torn-off limb in one hand like a grotesque club. Dark fluid, the creature's blood, stained his clothes and hands. For a moment, predator and human stared at each other across the jungle clearing. Then, with a series of high-pitched whines that sounded almost like whimpers, the pack fled. Vi lowered her weapon slowly, her hands shaking. She stared at Wyatt, trying to reconcile what she had just witnessed with everything she thought she knew about human capabilities. The strength he had displayed should have been physically impossible. No human should have been able to dismember a razor fang with their bare hands. "Are you injured?" Wyatt asked, apparently unaware of how dramatically he had just shattered her worldview. "No, Vi struggled for words. "How did you do that?" Wyatt looked down at the creature's remains, then at the blood on his hands. For the first time since she had met him, he seemed uncertain. "Military augmentations," he said finally. "Classified program. Genetic modifications, cybernetic enhancements, biochemical boosters. The Alliance wanted soldiers who could operate in any environment, against any threat." Vi approached the creature's corpse, studying it with her enhanced vision. The damage was extensive, not just torn flesh, but crushed bone and ruptured organs. The amount of force required would have been enormous. "All humans have this?" she asked. "No." Wyatt's answer was sharp, almost curt. "Most humans don't even know the program exists. It was discontinued after the war ended, deemed too unstable." Vi looked up at him, seeing him truly for the first time. The scars she had noticed earlier, the way he moved, the competence that seemed almost inhuman, it all made sense now. Wyatt wasn't just a human. He was something more, something her people's scientists would have considered impossible. "We should go," Wyatt said, cleaning his hands on some broad jungle leaves. "The pack will probably come back with reinforcements, and the smell of blood will attract other predators." They collected their gear and continued deeper into the jungle. Vi found herself stealing glances at Wyatt as they walked, trying to process what she had learned. The genetic research in her data crystal suggested that humans had greater potential than most species realized, but this went far beyond theoretical possibilities. As the day wore on, they encountered more of Caleris's dangers. A pit trap disguised with interwoven vines that would have swallowed Vi whole, but which Wyatt somehow detected and guided them around. A species of aerial creature that dropped from the canopy like living missiles, but which Wyatt drove off with precise shots that seemed to anticipate their movements perfectly. Each incident reinforced Vi's growing realization that humanity had been drastically underestimated by the galactic community. The question was whether this was deliberate, a secret, carefully guarded to maintain a strategic advantage, or whether humans themselves didn't fully understand their own potential. They made camp as Caleris's primary sun began to set the jungle, taking on new and more threatening sounds in the gathering darkness. Wyatt set up their shelter with mechanical efficiency, while Vi established a perimeter with motion sensors from their emergency kit. "You're not what I expected," Vi said, as they shared a meal of field rations heated over a chemical burner. "What did you expect?" Vi considered the question. "My people believe humans are weak, intellectually limited, culturally primitive, that you succeeded in spite of these limitations through aggression and luck." Wyatt's laugh held no humor. Your people aren't alone in thinking that. Most species in the galaxy consider humans a minor threat, at best a joke at worst. But you're not. No, he agreed quietly. We're not. Vi activated her personal shield generator, a small device that would provide them with some protection while they slept. The research I'm carrying suggests that many of our assumptions about human capabilities are incorrect. Genetically, you're not inferior, you're different. Your evolutionary path emphasized adaptability over specialization. And what does that mean? It means you have potential that most species, including humans themselves, don't understand. Vi deactivated 2 of her 4 arms, allowing them to rest, while the other 2 remained ready for action. The genetic modifications you mentioned, they didn't create abilities you didn't have. They just unlocked them. Wyatt stared into the jungle darkness, his expression unreadable. If that's true, why doesn't anyone know about it? Because knowledge is power, and power is carefully controlled. Vi's voice carried the bitterness of recent betrayal. The information I'm carrying would destabilize the existing order. There are those who would kill to keep it secret, and others who would start wars to possess it. They went to sleep in shifts, Vi taking the first watch, while Wyatt rested. As she sat in the darkness, listening to the jungle's nighttime symphony, she found herself thinking about the mission that had brought them together. The data crystal in her possession contained proof that the galaxy's various species were far more similar than anyone realized, and that humanity in particular had capabilities that could rival or exceed those of the supposedly superior races. Her people, the Azurans, had long prided themselves on their technological advancement and genetic purity. They saw themselves as the inheritors of the galaxy's oldest civilization, naturally superior to the younger races that had emerged in the past few million years. But the research suggested something far more complex, that all sentient species in the galaxy might share common ancestors, and that the differences between them were more superficial than fundamental. When it was Wyatt's turn to take watch, Vi found sleep elusive. Her dreams were filled with images of the razor fang being torn apart, of Wyatt's impossible strength, of the implications of what she had learned. She woke to find him sitting perfectly still, his eyes scanning the jungle with a predator's patience. "Trouble," she whispered. "Something's been watching us for the past hour," he replied quietly. "Not razor fangs. Something bigger." Vi enhanced her vision, scanning the darkness beyond their camp's perimeter. For a moment, she saw nothing. Then, between the trees, she caught a glimpse of something that made her blood freeze. Multiple eyes, reflecting their small light, set in a face that seemed too large, too alien, too wrong. "Shadowstalker," she breathed. Shadowstalkers were Colaris's ultimate predators. Intelligent, patient, and utterly ruthless, they hunted alone and were capable of taking down entire expeditions. Full-grown specimens could reach 15 meters in length, their bodies designed for stealth and sudden devastating attacks. "How big?" Wyatt asked, his hand moving to his rifle. "Very." Vi's voice was barely a whisper. "We need to run, now." They broke camp in seconds, grabbing only essential supplies and leaving everything else behind. As they moved through the jungle, Vi could feel the Shadowstalker following them, keeping pace with effortless ease. It was toying with them, she realized, following its hunting instincts to wear down prey before making the killing strike. Dawn came slowly through the thick canopy, but still, the creature followed. Vi began to understand that running was futile. The Shadowstalker would follow them all the way to the settlement, if necessary, attacking when they were too exhausted to resist. "We need to face it," she said as they paused beside a small stream. Wyatt nodded grimly. "Find high ground, force it to come to us on our terms." They climbed a series of rocky outcroppings that rose above the jungle floor, creating a natural fortress with limited approach routes. At the summit, they found an area that would give them clear lines of sight while limiting the Shadowstalker's mobility. The creature appeared at the base of the rocks, with the fluid grace of spilled mercury. Vi got her first clear look at it, and felt her courage waver. The descriptions in her briefings hadn't adequately conveyed the sheer alienness of the beast. Its body was long and serpentine, covered in scales that shifted color to match its surroundings. Multiple sets of limbs allowed it to move across any surface, and its head held too many eyes, too many teeth, too much intelligence. It began to climb. Vi opened fire, first her shots precise and well-aimed. The energy bolt struck the creature's hide, but seemed to disperse across its scales without causing significant damage. Wyatt's heavier rifle had more effect, drawing dark fluid and causing the creature to hiss in anger, but even those impacts seemed insufficient. The Shadow Stalker reached the top of the rocks faster than should have been possible. It flowed over the edge like liquid nightmare, its multiple limbs finding purchase on any available surface. Vi dove to one side as one of its appendages lashed out, missing her by centimeters. Wyatt stepped forward directly into the creature's path. What followed was beyond Vi's ability to fully process. The Shadow Stalker was larger, heavier, and equipped with natural weapons that could shred steel. By any rational assessment, it should have overwhelmed Wyatt in seconds. Instead, Wyatt fought the creature to a standstill. His movements were fluid, precise, almost dance-like. When the creature struck with its razor-sharp talons, Wyatt was already moving, redirecting the attack rather than trying to block it outright. When it tried to wrap him in its coils, he twisted free with strength that seemed to defy physics. Vi watched in fascination as Wyatt found openings in the creature's defenses that she wouldn't have noticed. Each strike he landed was placed with surgical precision, targeting nerve clusters and joint connections with the accuracy of someone who had studied Calaris bioforms extensively. The turning point came when the Shadow Stalker reared up on its hind limbs, attempting to bring its full weight down on Wyatt in a crushing blow. Instead of dodging, Wyatt stepped inside the creature's reach, both hands seizing its throat just below the head. For a moment, they were locked together, predator and human, straining against each other. Then Wyatt's muscles bunched, and he lifted. The Shadow Stalker, all 15 meters and several tons of it, rose off the ground. With a roar of effort that seemed to echo off the rocks themselves, Wyatt twisted his entire body and hurled the creature off the cliff. Vi heard it impact the jungle floor far below, with a crash that shook the trees. When she looked over the edge, the Shadow Stalker was already moving, apparently more stunned than injured, slithering away into the depths of the forest. "How?" Vi asked when she had recovered enough to speak. Wyatt sat heavily on a rock, breathing hard for the first time since she had met him. "Like I said, military modifications. But it's more than that. Humans. We're not built like other species. We don't have the limits they do." Vi stared at him, her scientific mind racing. "Show me." "What?" "Your genetics, your augmentations. I want to see them." Wyatt looked uncertain. "Vi, I don't think—" "I'm a ranking officer in the Azuran military," Vi said firmly. "I have field authorization to conduct biological analysis for security purposes, and what I just witnessed has considerable security implications." After a moment, Wyatt nodded. Vi activated a medical scanner from her kit, running it over Wyatt's body, while he stood patiently. The readings that appeared on her screen made her step back in shock. "This is impossible," she breathed. The scanner showed modifications so extensive they bordered on the unbelievable. Reinforced bone structure, enhanced muscle density, nervous system adaptations that would allow reflexes far beyond normal human parameters. But what truly stunned her was how seamlessly integrated everything was. This wasn't crude cybernetics or genetic grafting. It was a complete reconstruction of human biology. "The program was called Project Prometheus," Wyatt said quietly. "The idea was to create soldiers who could operate in any environment against any threat. The scientists weren't just adding to what was already there. They were unlocking potential that was already encoded in human DNA." Vi ran additional scans, each one revealing new impossibilities. Wyatt's muscle fibers showed density ratios that should have made movement impossible. His skeletal structure had been reinforced with materials she didn't recognize. His nervous system showed pathways that didn't exist in baseline human anatomy.
How many others like you were there?
Were, Wyatt corrected. The program was shut down after the war. Too many psychological casualties. Too many subjects who couldn't handle the modifications. I'm one of the few who remain stable. Vi looked at the data again, then at Wyatt himself. You're not just enhanced humans. You're proto-something. An evolutionary step forward. Maybe. Or maybe we're exactly what humans were always meant to be, and we just needed science to help us get there. They continued their journey toward the settlement, but Vi's mind was no longer focused on the immediate dangers. The implications of what she had learned were staggering. If humans had this kind of potential, if it could be unlocked safely and reliably, it would completely reshape the galactic balance of power. The settlement, when they finally reached it, was a small trading post built around a natural clearing. A handful of prefabricated structures surrounded a landing pad where a single ship waited, a sleek courier vessel that Vi recognized as Azuran design. "That's not good," Wyatt said, his hand moving instinctively to his weapon. "Why?" Vi asked, though she was beginning to have suspicions of her own. "Because according to my information, the settlement's only ship was supposed to be a freight hauler. That's a military vessel." Vi's four hands clenched into fists. Someone had been expecting them. Someone had known about her mission and had positioned assets to intercept her. The sabotage of Wyatt's ship began to make more sense. It had been designed to force them to land at this specific settlement. "Can we go around?" Wyatt shook his head. "Not unless you want to walk another 100 kilometers through the jungle. And even then, that ship could track us easily." Vi made a decision. "We go in openly. I still have my rank and my authority. Maybe I can bluff our way through." They approached the settlement with their weapons visible, but not raised hands away from triggers, but ready to move quickly if needed. The first person to greet them was an Azuran male in military uniform, someone Vi didn't recognize, which was unusual given her position in the command structure. "Commander Vi," the officer said, his tone formally respectful, but with an underlying tension. "You are to come with me immediately, by order of Elder Thalas and Chancellor Zorith." Vi felt her blood chill. Elder Thalas was the head of the Azuran High Council, and Chancellor Zorith was the military's supreme commander. If they were involved directly, it meant her mission had been compromised at the highest levels. "On what authority?" she demanded. "By authority of the Emergency Powers Act, Section 12, regarding threats to galactic security," the officer replied. "You are charged with theft of classified materials and conspiracy to commit treason against the Azuran people." Vi's hand moved toward her weapon, but stopped when she saw the red dots of a dozen laser sights appear on her chest. The settlement's entire population, she realized, consisted of Azuran military personnel in disguise. "And my escort?" Vi asked. "The human will be held for questioning regarding his knowledge of Azuran security matters. His cooperation will determine his treatment." Vi looked at Wyatt, seeing the calculation in his eyes. He was evaluating threats, angles of attack, escape routes. She could almost see him reaching the same conclusion she had. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Any attempt to fight would be suicide. "I'll come quietly," Vi said. "But I want assurances about Wyatt's safety." "That will depend on how cooperative you both are during questioning." They were separated immediately. Vi was escorted to the Azuran ship and placed in what was clearly a detention cell, despite the polite fiction that she was being transported for questioning. Through the small viewport, she watched Wyatt being led away in a different direction. Hours later, the ship lifted off. Through the viewport, Vi watched Colaris fall away beneath them, the vast green forest giving way to the star-speckled void of space. She was being taken to Nexus Station. She realized the very destination she had been trying to reach. But now she was a prisoner instead of a messenger. The journey to Nexus Station took 2 days. During that time, Vi was kept in isolation, allowed out of her cell, only for meals and exercise periods under heavy guard. Her guards were professional, but not hostile. They treated her with the respect due her rank, while making it clear that any attempt to escape would be futile. On the second day, one of her guards brought her an unexpected visitor. Elder Thalys entered the cell, flanked by two security officers, his ancient features bearing an expression of disappointment and regret. "Commander Vi," he said, settling into the cell's single chair, with the careful movements of someone whose age numbered in the hundreds of years. "I had hoped we could have this conversation under different circumstances." Elder Vi replied, maintaining her military bearing despite the circumstances. "I assume you're here to explain why a decorated officer is being treated like a common criminal." "You know why." Thalys's voice carried the weight of millennia. "You stole research that belongs to the Azuran people. You plan to deliver it to our enemies. I plan to deliver it to those who could use it to benefit all sentient life," Vi shot back. "The research proves that our concepts of racial superiority are based on false premises. It could revolutionize medicine, biotechnology, everything. And in doing so, destabilize everything our civilization has built." Thalys leaned forward, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the cell's harsh lighting. "Do you have any idea what would happen if this information became public? The chaos it would cause?" Vi felt her anger rising. "You mean the chaos of having to treat other species as equals? The chaos of admitting that our policies of genetic purity are based on lies? The chaos of war, Vi? The chaos of entire civilizations collapsing as the foundations of their societies are proven false?" Thalys stood pacing the small cell. "Not everyone is ready for this truth. Some may never be ready. So you would bury it forever, keep entire species in ignorance of their own potential? I would preserve stability. I would prevent the kind of galactic conflict that could destroy everything we've built over the past 10,000 years. Vi stared at the elder, seeing him clearly for the first time. She had always respected Thalys, had seen him as a voice of wisdom and moral authority. Now she realized he was just another politician, more concerned with maintaining the status quo than pursuing truth or justice. "And Wyatt, what will happen to him?" Thalys's expression darkened. "The human has seen things he shouldn't have seen, knows things he shouldn't know. His existence itself is evidence that humanity has been hiding their true capabilities from the galactic community. He's a person, not a security risk. He's both. And right now, he's being studied by our best scientists. The modifications he carries represent technology we thought was purely theoretical. If we can understand how they were achieved, replicate them." Vi felt sick. "You're experimenting on him. We're learning from him. There's a difference." "Is there?" Thalys moved toward the cell door. "You'll have a chance to speak on his behalf when we reach Nexus Station. Chancellor Zorith is waiting to conduct your formal debriefing. I suggest you be honest about everything. It's your only chance to save your human friend." After he left, Vi sat in silence, staring at the walls of her cell. The data crystal was still hidden in her uniform thanks to Azuran technology that could shield it from most scans. But what good was the information if she couldn't deliver it? What good was the truth if it remained buried? She thought about Wyatt, probably strapped to a table somewhere on the ship, while Azuran scientists poked and prodded at his modifications. The thought filled her with a rage she hadn't known she was capable of feeling. He had risked his life to protect her, had trusted her with secrets that could get him killed, and now he was paying the price for her mission. It was then that Vi made a decision that would define the rest of her life. She accessed her neural implant, calling up the technical specifications for Azuran detention systems. Her military rank gave her access to security protocols that other prisoners wouldn't have. If she could find a weakness, an overlooked vulnerability, there, a flaw in the cell's power distribution system, something that could be exploited if someone had the technical knowledge and the nerve to try. Vi began to plan. Nexus Station was the diplomatic hub of the galaxy, a massive structure built in neutral space, where representatives of all major civilizations could meet on equal terms. As their ship approached, Vi could see other vessels docked at the station's numerous bays, hegemony dreadnoughts, human cruisers, crystalline entity ships, and dozens of others. She was transferred to a secure section of the station, but not before catching a glimpse of the main concourse. Through the transparisteel barriers, she saw beings from across the galaxy, going about their business, negotiating treaties, conducting trade, or simply trying to coexist in the galaxy's only truly neutral territory. Her new cell was larger and more comfortable than the one on the ship, but it was still unmistakably a prison. Through the small window, she could see part of the station's internal structure, a maze of corridors and chambers that housed thousands of sentient beings. Chancellor Zorith arrived within hours of their docking. Unlike Elder Thalas, the Chancellor wasted no time on pleasantries or philosophical discussions. "You will tell me everything about the human," she said, without preamble. "His capabilities, his modifications, his origins. Everything." "I want to see him first," Vi replied. "I want proof that he's alive and unharmed." "You are not in a position to make demands. Then you won't get anything from me." Zorith's expression was cold calculating. After a moment, she activated a holographic projector. The image that appeared made Vi's breath catch in her throat. Wyatt was strapped to an examination table in what appeared to be a medical facility. He was unconscious, his body covered with monitoring devices and what looked like sample extraction points. Around the table, Azuran scientists worked with focused intensity, running scans and taking tissue samples. "He's alive," Zorith said. "For now. How long he remains that way depends on your cooperation." Vi fought to keep her voice steady. "What do you want to know?" "Start with his modifications. How extensive are they? What technologies were used? Can they be replicated?" Over the next hour, Vi answered Zorith's questions as truthfully as she could. She described what she had witnessed in the jungle, the scans she had taken, Wyatt's explanation of Project Prometheus. But she held back the most crucial details, the theoretical framework that would allow the modifications to be replicated, the genetic markers that would identify potential candidates. "You're holding back," Zorith said finally.
"I've told you everything I know about his combat capabilities."
"But not everything you know about how to create more like him." Vi met the Chancellor's gaze steadily. "That information isn't in my head. It's in the data crystal you're so eager to suppress." Zorith's eyes narrowed. "The crystal contains research about interspecies genetics, nothing about human enhancement programs." "Doesn't it?" Vi smiled for the first time since her capture. "The genetic sequences that were used to create Wyatt's modifications are identical to sequences found in all sentient species in the galaxy. The research proves that what humans call enhancement is really just activating dormant genetic potential that exists in everyone." The Chancellor's expression changed, shifting from suspicion to shock to a kind of hunger. "You're saying any species could be modified like your human—" "I'm saying the modifications aren't human technology at all. They're based on genetic principles that apply to all intelligent life. Your own people could undergo similar enhancements if you knew how to unlock them." Vi saw the moment when Zorith's priorities shifted. The interrogation became less about security and more about possibility. The Chancellor wanted the data crystal now not to suppress it, but to study it, to learn from it, to gain an advantage over every other civilization in the galaxy. It was exactly what Vi had hoped for. "I want to speak with the human," Vi said. "In person. If he confirms what I've told you, I'll help you access the relevant portions of the data crystal." Zorith considered the offer. 1 hour, under guard. Any attempt to aid his escape will result in both your deaths." Vi nodded. "Understood." She was escorted through the station's corridors, under heavy guard, passing through multiple security checkpoints, before reaching the medical section. The facility was state-of-the-art, equipped with technology she had rarely seen outside of Azura's most advanced research centers. Wyatt was in a room that was part medical bay, part laboratory. He was conscious now, strapped to a chair that held him upright, but allowed the scientists easy access to his body. Monitoring devices covered his skin, and she could see multiple injection sites where samples had been taken. "Vi," his voice was hoarse but alert, Are you all right?
I should be asking you that.
She moved closer, ignoring the guard's tense readiness.
What have they done to you?
Tests, scans. They're trying to figure out how the modifications work. Wyatt's eyes met hers, and she saw something there, not defeat, but calculation. They're particularly interested in the genetic markers. Vi felt a flutter of hope. She had wondered if Wyatt would understand what she was really asking when she demanded to see him. The fact that he mentioned genetic markers suggested he was thinking along the same lines she was.
Have you told them about the activation sequences? She asked carefully.
I've told them what I know about the physical modifications, but the genetic side of things. He shrugged, as much as his restraints allowed. That was never my specialty. One of the Azuran scientists stepped forward. The subject's modifications are far more extensive than our initial scans indicated. The integration of biological and mechanical elements is unlike anything in our databases. Vi moved to examine one of the monitoring displays using her clearance to access the detailed readings. What she saw there made her inhale sharply. The scientists weren't just studying Wyatt's modifications, they were trying to reverse engineer them to understand how they could be applied to Azuran physiology. Interesting, she said aloud. These readings suggest that the modifications aren't just additions to baseline human genetics. They're activations of dormant sequences that exist in all vertebrate species. She heard Chancellor Zorith step up behind her. Explain. The human genome contains what researchers call junk DNA sequences that appear to serve no function. But according to the research in my data crystal, this junk DNA isn't useless at all. It's a repository of genetic potential, shared by all intelligent species in the galaxy. Vi manipulated the display, highlighting specific genetic sequences in Wyatt's modified genome. These activation markers here and here, they correspond to sequences found in Azuran hegemony crystalline and every other sentient species we've studied. The modifications don't make humans superhuman. They make them what every species could become if the right genetic switches were flipped. Chancellor Zorith moved closer to the display, her 4 eyes scanning the data with intense focus. You're suggesting that evolution has been held back, that sentient species are operating at a fraction of their potential. I'm not suggesting it, I'm stating it as fact. The research proves it conclusively. Vi saw the moment when Zorith made her decision. The Chancellor turned to the guards. Remove the subject's restraints. Both of them are to be transferred to a secure conference room immediately. Chancellor, one of the guards protested, standing orders are superseded by my direct command. Do it now. As Wyatt's restraints were removed, Vi helped him stand on unsteady legs. He was weak but functional, and she could see him assessing their new situation with the tactical mind that had kept them alive in the jungle. They were escorted to a conference room in the station's secure section, a space designed for sensitive negotiations. The room was comfortable but clearly monitored with cameras and sensors that would detect any attempt at escape or communication with outside parties. The data crystal, Zorith said without preamble. I want full access to the genetic research. And in exchange, the safe passage off the station for both of you. New identities as ship credits to establish yourselves wherever you choose to go. Vi pretended to consider the offer. In reality, she was buying time, waiting for the right moment to execute the plan she had been formulating since her capture. There's a problem, she said finally. The crystal is encoded with a biometric lock. It can only be accessed while in the presence of someone with the proper genetic markers. Your genetic markers? Not mine. Vi looked at Wyatt. His. The crystal requires the presence of someone who carries the activated genetic sequences it describes. Without them, the data remains encrypted. Zorith's eyes narrowed. You're saying the crystal won't work unless this human is present. I'm saying whoever designed the security knew that someone might try to steal the research. They made sure it could only be accessed by someone who had already undergone the modifications described within it. It was a lie, but a convincing one. The data crystal had no such security measures. Vi could access it at any time with her command codes. But she needed Zorith to believe that Wyatt was essential to the process. "Very well," the Chancellor said. "Demonstrate." Vi removed the data crystal from its hiding place in her uniform, a small device, no larger than her thumb. She placed it on the table and activated her personal interface, projecting a holographic display above the crystal. Lines of genetic code filled the air, real data from the research, but not the most sensitive portions. Vi selected a section that dealt with basic genetic modification principles, information that was valuable, but not catastrophic if it fell into the wrong hands. "As you can see," she said, manipulating the display, "the data is accessible. But watch what happens when we try to access the activation sequences." She switched to a different section of the crystal one that did require special authorization. The display showed an error message: genetic verification required. Authorized Prometheus sequence detected. "The system recognizes the markers in his modified DNA," Vi explained. "Without his presence, the most critical data remains locked." Chancellor Zorith stared at the display, her expression calculating. Vi could practically see the wheels turning in the Chancellor's mind. The offer of safe passage had been a lie, of course. Zorith had no intention of allowing either of them to leave the station alive. But now, she believed she needed Wyatt functional and cooperative, which changed the dynamic considerably. "I'll need time to study this data," Zorith said, "to understand its implications fully." "Of course. But might I suggest we continue this discussion in a more appropriate setting? Perhaps in the station's main conference chamber, where other interested parties could observe." Zorith looked sharply at Vi. "Other parties?" "Well, surely you don't expect to keep this discovery to yourself. The genetic enhancement technology could benefit many species. It seems only fair that representatives of those species be allowed to participate in the research." The Chancellor's expression darkened. "This research belongs to the Azuran people. We will decide how it's shared." "Will you?" Vi's voice carried a subtle challenge. "Because according to interstellar law, research conducted on a neutral station like Nexus belongs to the galactic community as a whole. Any attempt to monopolize such information would be considered an act of aggression against the neutral zone." It was mostly bluff, but based on enough truth to be convincing. Nexus Station operated under unique legal frameworks designed to prevent any one power from gaining unfair advantage over others. Zorith stood abruptly. "You'll both remain here while I consult with my advisors. Any attempt to access the crystal's data without my presence will be considered an act of treason." After she left, Vi and Wyatt were alone, except for the surveillance systems. They maintained casual conversation, knowing everything they said was being monitored. "Interesting strategy," Wyatt said quietly. "Play them against each other." "Multiple pressure points," Vi replied. "Zorith wants the technology for military advantage. Thalos wants to suppress it for stability. But there are other players on this station who would have different priorities. How do we get a message to them?" Vi smiled. "We don't. We make them come to us." She approached the conference room's communication console, using her military authorization to access the station's public announcement system. It was a risky move, but the only way to force the situation. "This is Commander Vi of the Azuran military, broadcasting on all frequencies," she said, into the console. "I am currently in possession of genetic research that proves the feasibility of biological enhancement for all sentient species. This research demonstrates that the evolutionary potential of every intelligent race in the galaxy has been artificially limited." Alarms began sounding almost immediately. Vi continued speaking rapidly, knowing she had only seconds before security shut down the transmission. "The research data is currently on Nexus Station, where representatives of the Azuran government are attempting to suppress it. I call upon all species representatives currently docked at this station to demand immediate access to this information under the Neutral Zone Treaty." The transmission cut off, but the damage was done. Within minutes, they could hear commotion in the corridors outside the conference room. Raised voices, the sound of running feet, and the distinctive hum of numerous ships powering up their engines. Wyatt moved to the window. Security teams are taking positions. Looks like delegations from at least 6 different species demanding to know what's going on. Perfect, Vi said. Nothing like a potential diplomatic incident to focus attention. The door to the conference room slammed open, and Chancellor Zorth strode in, flanked by a squad of heavily armed guards. Her expression was furious. "You foolish woman," she snarled. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" "I've ensured that the research won't be buried," Vi replied calmly. By now, every major power in the galaxy knows about the genetic enhancement technology. You can't suppress it, you can't monopolize it, and you certainly can't kill us without causing a major diplomatic crisis. "Can't I?" Zorth's voice was deadly quiet. "An accident during questioning. Security footage mysteriously corrupted. The data crystal damaged beyond recovery. These things happen." Vi felt a chill, but stood her ground. "Perhaps. But that won't stop the other delegations from demanding access to our research teams. Too many people know now, Chancellor. The secret is out." Before Zorth could respond, another voice cut through the tension. "Commander Vi, Chancellor Zorth, I think we need to have a conversation." The speaker was tall, elegant, with the characteristic crystalline features of the ethereal confederation. Ambassador Ildrea, one of the most respected diplomats in the galaxy, and someone Vi had hoped to attract with her broadcast. Ambassador Zorth said through clenched teeth, "This is an internal Azuran matter." "On an Azuran ship, perhaps," Ildrea replied smoothly. "But this is Nexus Station, and the implications of what Commander Vi has described extend far beyond Azuran interests." The ambassador moved into the room, followed by a dozen other beings representatives of nearly every major civilization in the galaxy. Vi recognized several of them: General Hask of the Hegemony Doctor, Elizabeth Warren representing humanity, the collective entity known as Prime Node, speaking for the machine intelligences. "Commander Vi," Ambassador Ildrea said, "would you be willing to present your research to a full session of the Nexus Council?" "I would be honored," Vi replied immediately. Chancellor Zorth stepped forward. "I forbid it. Commander Vi is under arrest for treason against the Azuran state. The research she claims to possess is classified material." "Is it?" Dr. Warren spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to cutting through political nonsense. "Because, according to our records, the genetic enhancement program she's describing sounds remarkably similar to classified human research. Research that we believed had been stolen years ago." The room fell silent. Vi felt her heart racing as the implications sank in. If the research had originally been human, if her people had stolen it. "Interesting," General Hask rumbled, her voice like grinding stone. "The Hegemony has also lost research teams in that sector, teams that were investigating similar genetic anomalies. As has the Confederation," Ambassador Ildrea added quietly. Chancellor Zorth's expression had gone from anger to something approaching fear. "You're all mistaken. This research was conducted by Azuran scientists in Azuran facilities." "Then you won't mind submitting it to independent verification," Dr. Warren said. "After all, if the research is truly Azuran in origin, that will be easily proven." Vi saw her opportunity. "I call for immediate asylum under the Neutral Zone Treaty," she said formally, "both for myself and for Wyatt. We request protection while presenting our research to the full Nexus Council." The room erupted in shouting as the various delegations began arguing among themselves. Chancellor Zorth was speaking rapidly into a communication device, probably calling for backup. The Azuran guards looked uncertain, caught between their orders and the reality of being vastly outnumbered by the representatives of a dozen hostile civilizations. In the chaos, Vi caught Wyatt's eye and nodded toward a secondary exit she had noticed earlier. They moved slowly, trying not to attract attention. They almost made it. A young Azuran lieutenant, probably trying to prove his loyalty, shouted and raised his weapon. The room exploded into action as security forces from multiple species moved to protect their own representatives. Wyatt grabbed Vi and pushed her behind an overturned table as energy bolts filled the air. Ambassador Ildrea was shouting for calm, while General Hosk was ordering her guards to establish a perimeter. In the middle of it all, Chancellor Zorith was screaming orders in Azuran while trying to reach the data crystal. "We need to get out of here," Wyatt shouted over the noise. "The crystal," Vi replied. "We can't let them have it." The device was still sitting on the conference table now, in the middle of what was rapidly becoming a firefight. Vi made a decision that probably saved both their lives and changed the course of galactic history. She activated the crystal's emergency broadcast function. The data, all of it, every bit of research, every genetic sequence, every enhancement protocol began transmitting simultaneously to every ship docked at Nexus Station. Within minutes, it would be spreading across the quantum communication network, reaching every corner of the galaxy. Chancellor Zorith realized what was happening and lunged for the crystal, but Wyatt intercepted her. The two collided near the table, and Vi watched in fascination as Wyatt moved with inhuman speed and precision. The Chancellor was no slouch in combat. Azuran military officers were trained to fight. But against Wyatt's enhanced capabilities, she might as well have been moving in slow motion. The fight ended when a combined team of security officers from multiple species finally restored order to the room. The damage was done, though. The data crystal lay in pieces on the floor, its contents already disseminated across the galaxy. "Well," Ambassador Ildrea said into the sudden quiet, "I suppose that settles the question of who has access to the research." In the aftermath of what historians would later call the Nexus Incident, Vi and Wyatt found themselves in protective custody aboard the USS Endurance, one of humanity's most advanced ships. Captain Elena Alvarez, the ship's commanding officer, had volunteered to provide sanctuary while the various galactic powers sorted out the legal and political implications of the genetic research revelation. "You realize you've probably started a revolution," Captain Alvarez said during their first meeting in her ready room. "That was the idea," Vi replied. She felt exhausted, physically, emotionally, spiritually drained by everything that had happened. The truth needed to come out. "But why come to us?" the captain asked. "Why not release it through your own channels?" Vi looked at Wyatt, who was sitting beside her. His injuries from the Azuran experiments were healing quickly, another testament to his enhanced physiology. "Because my people had already proven they couldn't be trusted with it. And because—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Because in the past few days I've learned that everything my people taught me about humanity was wrong." Captain Alvarez smiled. "Speaking of which, we've had some interesting conversations with our science teams about Wyatt's modifications. Dr. Sarah Kim would like to speak with both of you about the research data if you're willing." The next few hours were spent in the ship's medical bay, where Dr. Kim and her team conducted the most comprehensive analysis of the genetic data that had been possible. What they found confirmed Vi's greatest hopes and worst fears. "The research is genuine," Dr. Kim announced to the assembled group. "The genetic sequences described in the data are indeed present in all sentient species we've tested. The potential for enhancement exists in every intelligent race in the galaxy." "But," Wyatt prompted, sensing hesitation in the doctor's voice, "but the activation process is incredibly dangerous. The human program mentioned in the data project Prometheus had a success rate of less than 15%. Most subjects died during the modification process, and many of those who survived experienced severe psychological side effects." Vi felt her heart sink. "So the research is useless?" "Not useless," Dr. Kim corrected. "But it will take years, maybe decades of additional research to make the process safe enough for widespread use. In the meantime, the very existence of this knowledge is going to cause major upheavals across the galaxy." She was right. Over the following days, as they waited aboard the Endurance for the political situation to stabilize, they watched the galaxy convulse with the implications of the revealed research. Some species, like humanity, embraced the discovery and began careful ethical research into genetic enhancement. Others, like the hegemony, declared it an abomination and banned all research into genetic modification. The Azuran government split into factions, with Elder Thalas's conservative faction fighting Chancellor Zorith's militaristic wing for control of their response to the crisis. But perhaps the most significant change was in the way species viewed each other. The revelation that all intelligent life shared the same genetic heritage, that the differences between races were largely superficial, challenged millennia of prejudice and racial hierarchy. "It will take generations for the full impact to be felt," Vi said one evening, as she and Wyatt stood on the observation deck watching the stars wheel past. "But it's started. The transformation, I mean." "And us?" Wyatt asked. "What happens to us when all this settles down?" Vi considered the question. She could probably return to Azuran space eventually, as a hero to some factions, a villain to others, but no longer the fugitive she had been. Wyatt had been offered positions with several human military organizations, all eager to learn from his unique experience. "I've been offered a position with the Nexus Council," she said finally, "heading up a new department focused on interspecies genetic research, making sure the enhancement technology is developed safely and shared equally." "That sounds like important work." "It is. And they've indicated that they'd be interested in having a liaison from the enhanced human community. Someone who understands both the technical and practical aspects of the modifications." Wyatt turned to look at her, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Are you asking me to work with you?" "I'm asking you to be my partner," Vi said softly, "in every sense of the word." The relationship that had grown between them during their desperate flight across Colaris had developed into something deeper during their time on the Endurance. It wasn't just attraction, though. Vi couldn't deny the physical pull she felt toward him. It was recognition, understanding, a meeting of minds and souls that transcended species boundaries. "The genetic research says it's possible," Vi continued. "Azuran and human compatibility, not just intellectually or emotionally, but biologically. We could have a future together if you want it." Wyatt moved closer, taking her upper hands in his. "I've never wanted anything more." 6 months later, the Interspecies Research Station, known as Prometheus Base, was established at the edge of neutral space. Named after the failed human enhancement program, but symbolizing a new beginning, it represented a joint effort by multiple civilizations to develop safe, ethical genetic enhancement technologies. Vi served as the station's director of genetic research, while Wyatt led the enhanced physiology department. Together, they oversaw teams of scientists from dozens of species, all working toward the shared goal of unlocking the genetic potential that existed within all sentient life. The work was challenging, often frustrating, and occasionally dangerous. Several early attempts at cross-species enhancement failed catastrophically, and there were constant political pressures from various governments who wanted to control the research for their own purposes. But there were successes too. The first successfully enhanced Azuran, a volunteer who underwent a modified version of Wyatt's treatment, survived the process with no adverse effects. The first enhanced crystalline entity achieved physical capabilities that astonished even their own species. Slowly, carefully, the galaxy was changing. Standing in their shared quarters on Prometheus Base, looking out at the stars that no longer seemed quite so vast or unknowable, Vi reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a desperate mission to save stolen research to a love that had defied every convention of their respective species, it had been a path neither of them could have predicted. "Any regrets?" Wyatt asked, joining her at the viewport. Vi considered the question seriously. She had given up her military career, her place in Azuran society, the comfort of living among her own people. She had embraced a love that many of her people still considered unnatural, dedicated her life to research that challenged the very foundations of galactic civilization. "None," she said finally. "Absolutely none." The future stretched before them, full of challenges and possibilities. There would be more setbacks, more political crises, more species, to convince that the path of enhancement was worth pursuing. But they would face it together, two beings from different worlds, who had found in each other a shared destiny among the stars. In the end, Vi thought that was perhaps the most profound enhancement of all the ability to love beyond the boundaries of species, to build something new and beautiful from the combination of different strengths and perspectives. It was a genetic modification that required no laboratory, no dangerous procedures, no technology beyond the willingness to open one's heart to possibility. As if reading her thoughts, Wyatt squeezed her hand. "Ready for tomorrow's challenges?" "With you," Vi smiled, her four eyes reflecting the starlight. "I'm ready for anything." The galaxy was changing one genetic sequence at a time, one breakthrough at a time, one love at a time. And at the center of it all, a human and an Azuran stood together, proving that the greatest enhancements came not from modifying what made them different, but from celebrating what made them alike. The story of how Vi watched a human rip an apex predator into chunks like nothing had become legend, told in scientific papers and military academies, in diplomatic halls, and around campfires on frontier worlds. But for Vi herself, the true story was not about strength or violence or the overcoming of monsters. It was about two souls finding each other across the vast darkness of space and choosing to build a future together that neither of their species had thought possible. In the end, that was the most revolutionary enhancement of all.